All right. So if for any reason you have any questions or anything, you can definitely drop them in the chat. Luckily, I have helping me today Dr. Matthew Klooster, man of many knowledges, who will be helping answer these questions as we're going through. And I will be giving the majority of the presentation. Also here, we have Jen with us, who many of you know and have worked with throughout Tuition Benefit many times before. Infinite knowledge as well. And she'll be giving some information on our G-SHIP updating as far as like payments and things. So a lot of good information coming your way today. If you have any questions, you can either drop them in the chat. If it's something dire or etc., you could raise your hand and we might be able to answer it while we're going. We're also planning a Q&A session at the end as well, however, so you can plan for that accordingly if you're not wanting to kind of interrupt the flow, as it were. So we'll go ahead and jump right in. So as far as our introduction is concerned, we just have a brief kind of agenda. Today, we're going to be talking a bit about the drop versus withdraw policies at the University of Utah and how they affect tuition benefit. And so that's going to be the majority of what I will be discussing with you today and kind of sharing with you. They are nebulous and strange, especially your first time interacting with them. This will be great information for both new and old, employees, people who've been here forever. Because even when I was working in the registrar's office, I got people all the time who are like, I've been here 20 years and I never knew there was a difference. And that's fine. I'm happy to help elaborate on what that is. And we'll also talk a little bit about what those retroactive drop processes might look like as well. And then we'll move into the G-SHIP information that Jen will be providing. But first, a brief introduction of who I am, as I am kind of the mystery elephant in the room. My name is Logan Gowers. I've worked for the university for a little while now, but I was definitely in a role that was more associated with the registrar's office. And so if you've interacted with me, it's probably been either, oh my gosh, Logan saved me one day, or Logan had to be the bearer of bad news. And so your opinion of me may go either way, and that's fine. I totally understand. A lot of what I was doing in my previous position was rule mongering and lawyering and things like that, going through all of those and making sure that policy was being, hit correctly. And I'm doing much the same here. I'm going to be helping make sure that we're fitting our policies, but also helping you succeed in the tuition benefit program. If you ever need to contact me, please don't hesitate to do so. I'm happy to answer any questions I possibly can. And I'm also very good about being, if I don't know the answer to something, I will let you know honestly and be like, hey, I've never heard that before, but I'll find the answer for you. And so I'll go look into things and see if there's anything I can do to help in those regards. You can either contact me at my email, which is the l.gowers@utah.edu there. You can call me. That extension is my work extension, so you can just call me and it comes right to my phone in that regards. And then additionally, there is the tuition benefit email, which is our general email. Always a good option, especially if for some reason I am indisposed for whatever reason. Someone else might be able to jump in and assist with answering that question in my stead. So always a great option. And that's pretty much the long and short of it. For some of you, you're looking at this list and going, oh, he was a teacher. That explains a lot, especially for those of you who have interacted with me for more than 10 minutes, because some of those mannerisms never really go away. But for the meat and potatoes, let's actually get into the thing that most of you are here for, which is the TB information and the extra information on drops, withdraws, and etc. So I'm going to kind of put a hard line in the sand between drops and withdrawals. They're so similar on the outside, but they have a large amount of difference as far as policies and procedures are concerned. So you're going to want to make sure that you're keeping these in mind. Now, all of this information is really detailed out in the registrar's office website, so you can definitely go there and find some of this. We're also going to have some of these slides available so that you can see them later if you ever want to go back and see what it is I have been talking about. So first, let's define what a drop is. A drop occurs prior to the add drop deadline, which feels like that should make obvious sense, but there's always a bit of confusion in there, especially since those are the same deadline. And that is for the course. You'll notice that there's a little asterisk there that says some courses, such as miscellaneous session courses, are dated weirdly or differently in the system. And so you may encounter situations where you're interacting with the student and they're saying like, hey, I'm going to drop this bowling class. And you're looking at this, one calendar and it says this deadline for the full term courses, but it's actually a half term class. And so the deadline is going to be actually different. All add drop deadlines are prorated according to the amount of time that they spend in class. And so you're going to want to make sure that you're checking when they say, hey, I want to drop this class. a good question to ask is it one of our full term courses or does it have weird start and end dates? Because that gives you a good starting place to know, do I need to go look up other dates? Do I need to contact the registrar's office? Where do I find those deadlines? Now, in like 99% of cases, students are going to be able to do their own drops. So if they get onto their student homepage and they attempt to do that drop, they're going to be fine doing it on their own as long as they're within the deadline. There are very rare exceptions where they won't be able to do it on their own. And usually it's for strange courses that like are only for a day. And so the system just doesn't know what to do with itself. And that is a good time to send those students to the registrar's office, especially if you're certain that they should be in the deadline, such as the class hasn't even started yet, which I did see from time to time in my days in the registrar's office. Now, the important thing for tuition benefit purposes, dropped courses are not charged tuition. So when they're fully dropped from their record, no tuition charge is going to come through. It should disappear entirely. If for some reason they drop a class and that tuition charge is still showing, they should contact income accounting because that should go away pretty quickly after. It may not be instantaneous, but if in a business day that charge is still there, something else may be going on. Additionally, drop courses will not show on a student's transcript. So when it is entirely dropped, any transcript that they get in the future, unofficial or official, that class is not going to show on that record. This is a big point of concern for a lot of students, especially I did get this question a lot from graduate students. Graduate students were very concerned about things like W grades or failing grades on their transcript. So they were very much wanting to make sure that that was not going to show at all if they dropped it. Now, in the red, this is kind of where it hits more on tuition benefit. Drop courses do not count towards the tuition benefit minimum enrollment. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that on the next slide, but essentially if they drop a course, that's no longer going to count for those requirements and may have a negative effect on their TB. Kind of shifting gears over into withdraw territory. Withdraw occurs when a student attempts to drop after the deadline. So up to add drop, they can do the drop on their own. After that point, however, it transitions into withdraws. Withdraws leave a W grade on the student's transcript, which will stay on their record for time and all eternity. Any transcript that they order in the future, that's going to show. And that can be a bit of a point of concern for some students, especially because we cannot guarantee, especially back in when I was in the registrar's office, we couldn't guarantee what a W grade would look like if they sent that transcript somewhere else. If they sent that off to, say, another institution, that other institution may see that W grade as failing, and they will choose to bring it in as a failing grade, or they may just disregard it entirely. We really had no way of knowing how that was going to be interpreted for other institutions. And so it's something when you have your students asking, what does a W grade mean? Well, it's not going to affect them negatively here. That's not a positive or negative as far as, GPA is concerned. However, you'll probably notice that first bullet right away, withdrawn courses are still charged tuition. Students are responsible for paying for withdrawn courses. After that drop deadline is passed, they're no longer, able to avoid that tuition charge. Moving on to our red bullets, you'll notice that withdrawn courses do not count towards the tuition benefit minimum enrollment either. So just like drop courses, if they withdraw from something, they may be at risk of losing their TB. Additionally, withdrawn courses are not covered at all by tuition benefit. Students are going to be required to pay for that course separately. And as an additional note, they will be paying at their residency rate for withdrawn courses. So for example, if they are a non-resident and they withdraw from a course, they will be paying the full non-resident rate for that withdrawn course. The waiver does not cover that. And so that is something that you definitely will want to discuss with students as they are considering withdrawals, as they come to you and they're like, hey, I'm having troubles with this course, but it's too late to drop. If I withdraw, is that going to be a bad thing? It very well might be. It might be something that's a struggle for them and they'll want to keep that in mind. Now, what does that mean for TB overall? It is most ideal that a student work with their advisors and TB coordinators when considering dropping or withdrawing any courses, even if it's well before deadlines. If there's like, oh, I'm before the drop deadline, and then they attempt to drop it and find out it's one of those weirdly dated courses all of a sudden, well, now maybe they have a W on their record. That wasn't part of the plan. What is that going to look like for them? Getting that information from you in the registrar's office is imperative as they move forward. So definitely encourage them, which I'm sure you're already doing, but encourage them to work with you and your advisors and things as they're moving forward with this process. As another reminder, a student needs to be enrolled for the minimum required credits. That's 9 credits for fall or spring, 3 credits for summer. Dropping or withdrawing courses could really leave the student in a situation where that requirement's not being met, and all of a sudden they have a huge bill on their hands they weren't anticipating. Neither dropped or withdrawn courses count towards the credit minimum, as we said. So there's some examples there. So say they're like 12 credits and they go down to 9. Well, they'll be okay. They'll still be covered by TB as long as it was a full drop. And then again, if they drop from 9 credits down to 6, well, that is a problem. They will lose their TB in that case because they've dropped to the below the minimum. However, withdrawn again is something to keep in mind. If they withdraw from 12 to 9, they're not going to lose their TB for that 9 credits, but they will be responsible for the withdrawn credits separately. And if they're non-resident, that's even more than they were expecting. So it can add up really fast. Additionally, if a student is in 9 credits, withdraws down to 6, they're going to lose everything. All the TB is going to go away and they're going to have to pay for all of that on their own. Now, in any of those cases, let's say you have a student who drops, student who withdraws, in any regard. If it's during the semester, they might have some options to still remedy that. For example, one option that we saw a lot in the registrar's office is we would have students come to us, and specifically with TB, I remember this a lot. They would come to us and say, hey, I accidentally withdrew from a course. I lost my TB. I need to get back in that course. If it's still an active course, the registrar's office might have some options to help them get back into that course in a relatively easy way, usually just a few signatures from professors. Or if they have dropped or withdrawn a course and they want to add something else entirely, they may be able to go through the late add process using signatures from important people within the department, generally the instructor and the head of the department, just to approve them adding that course late. There are some late fees associated with that won't be covered by TB. Those late fees are a separate part. However, it is an option that we saw a lot in the registrar's office, usually adding thesis credits. They would be either increasing their thesis credits or they would be just adding thesis credits entirely onto their schedule, which when they weren't there before. A lot of different options to help remedy that situation. Just kind of a note to keep in mind with that. If you do have a student who does something like that, where they drop down and then add something after, there's a very good chance that with the delay of processes, they're going to see a temporary tuition bill pop up where they go below the minimum. All of a sudden, the bill is going to pop up. Now they're above the minimum again, and it's fixed. It'll take a little bit of time for the system to catch back up and remedy that tuition benefit back onto their record. And so you may have a student come to you in a panic being like, I thought I fixed it. And now all of a sudden I have all this money I owe. What do I do? What do I do? You can let them know that it's probably just going to take that time. Good time to just check your report and see, are you at the right minimum credits? Is everything else looking okay? Is something else maybe delaying your tuition benefit? Just so you know what that's going to look like for them. Drop for non-payment. There's a lot of text here, but I'm probably going to hit this one a bit more quickly just because this is very rarely a situation we're going to see in tuition benefit. That big red text there in the center should give you a good idea why. Now, drop for non-payment was something that only ever occurs once a semester. It's not something that will happen regularly, like every month they're checking and pulling students from courses. It's not really how that works. It happens once during the semester, and any outlier cases are handled individually between income accounting and the registrar's office. It happens after census, so you have an idea of when that will occur. It's generally about a week after census is when that goes through. If a student is selected from drop for non-payment, they will receive multiple warnings. They will receive emails. Income accounting will probably be sending them notifications on their homepage. Like, they will be told in one way or another that they may be eligible or for being dropped for non-payment. So it's very rarely actually going to be a surprise if they're watching their UMail, and encourage your students to watch their UMail. Students who are correctly entered into the tuition benefit program, however, should be held from being dropped for non-payment. If all the information is there, the tuition is going to be distributed, it should be fine. You're not really going to encounter this very often. However, because outliers exist in all cases, it is probably going to happen to someone at least once. So just in case that once comes around, here's some kind of advice that we can share with you on that. First thing, check to see that they were entered into the TB portal correctly. Maybe this is a situation where you did your part, they're all entered, it should be fine, but they never signed. Or some other weirdness is happening, like maybe it wasn't submitted totally correctly. And so there's some sort of discrepancy between the portal and what should be happening. And so you'll want to make sure you're checking that and getting it remedied as soon as possible, especially working with us as much as we need. You can also contact us with a brief explanation of what you're seeing. Hey, the student was dropped for non-payment. I didn't think that was a thing. Here's their info. What can you help me out? Can you help me find this information? And we're happy to investigate that and see what's going on. We will at that point contact income accounting more than likely just to determine, hey, was this a valid drop for non-payment? What's kind of going on? We thought it was, they were still on TB. Everything looks good on our side. What's going on? If we find that it is valid, we will send you some instructions to have the student contact income accounting and then eventually probably the registrar's office for some steps on possibly getting reinstated into their courses if that's something they want to do. If it is an invalid drop for non-payment and there is some sort of error going on at a university level, we will work with income accounting to try to find a solution, probably working with you as well. Again, this is highly unlikely though. Neither of these situations are likely going to happen, but if I didn't put it in, it would happen and then there would be panic. So we're going to just include it here to avoid panic. Retroactive drops. This is probably going to be the one that's most interesting because this is one of the processes that is in the registrar's office that either a lot of people know about and dread or don't really know exists at all. And so this is going to be me handing as much information to you as I can. A word of caution to this tale. I haven't been with the registrar's office for a few months now. Some of these processes may have updated during my time away, but I am going to give you what information I feel confident giving you, and I would highly suggest contacting the registrar's office to kind of fill in whatever gaps that I may not feel confident giving at this time. But for the most part, we should have some pretty good information to share with you. So just as a word of technical definition, retroactive drops are any drop that occurs after the class has ended. Now, for my astute students, you may have remembered earlier I said some classes end with weird dates or end at weird times. So you can't just say, oh, it's after the semester. That class may have ended on week 2 of the semester, and any drop that occurs after would technically be a retroactive drop and would go through this process. And so just something to keep in mind, a bit of technical definition. You're going to encounter that more when you're interacting with the registrar's office because they'll want to know, hey, has this class actually even ended? Because if it's not, this is not the process you're going to go through. So now, these can only be approved by the registrar's office. They're the only people who are allowed to do these retroactive drops, and it is via the petition for consideration of exception to policy, which is a very long title, yes. Luckily, that title and that form are available online, so you can check that link there. It's available on their forms section of the registrar's website. If you have a student needing to consider this process, it is really best you consider contacting the registrar's office for the best instructions you can receive. They have a petitions email specifically, that is petition@utah.edu, and they will give you full instructions. You can also ask clarifying questions. You can ask, hey, this is the situation we're seeing with this student. Do you really think this is going to be a petition? Like, do you think this would fly? Or is this kind of weird or not really going to work? They'll give you some advice of where to start or what they may have seen before. General submissions will require at minimum, however, the correctly completed form from their website, a personal statement from the student describing the situation, and a letter of support from the dean of their major college. Now, in most cases, that's going to be very easy to do because all of these petitions really initiate through deans of major colleges or whoever is that appropriate equivalent. And most of those people already have this form. They probably keep like 20 of them in their desk at a time. If you're ever unsure who your contact would be for that, I would go again to the petition email. I've seen one from every department at least, so they can direct you to who your contact might be best for that case. Now, no petition is guaranteed. Absolutely no petition is guaranteed whatsoever. The registrar's office has a whole committee of people that they pull from all over. Some are registrar's office people, some are people from advising, some are people from other offices all over campus. And so I can never tell you for sure what that committee is going to decide, and neither can they really. Until the petition is right in front of them and they're looking over it and have all the data, that's the only time a decision will actually be made. If a petition for retroactive drop is approved during the semester itself, the course will be just seen as a drop on their record. It will just go away entirely, not going to show on their transcript, not going to be charged for the tuition. So you can consider it and act accordingly as a drop, and using the same instructions we went over earlier on kind of like, hey, this is what a drop is going to do for TB purposes. Now, if a petition for retroactive drop is approved for a previous semester, meaning a semester we are well truly done with, especially if we've already done our final calculations and such, it might be best to contact us and share that information with us. Hey, we had this student approved for this petition, but it was for like last semester or so. We will then take that data in hand and do a bit of an investigation of our own to see if that's going to have any sort of effect on TB. Again, until we have that data in front of us, it's going to be difficult to say. Each case is going to be having to taken by hand. Continuing on retroactive drops, a good question we usually got a lot in the registrar's office is like, well, when do we do this? Like, when is the right time? When is it, going to really be approved, or something is really going to make sense for a retroactive drop? There's really only two scenarios that were really common with retroactive drops. And the most common was university error. If we could see very clear misadvisement in play, especially from people who either shouldn't have been giving that advisement or just gave it incorrectly entirely. For example, we had situations where students would be told, oh yeah, you definitely need to take class A to graduate. They would get into class A, get a good grade and get to the end of it, or maybe a bad grade or whatever. And then their advisor would be like, well, why did you take that class? And then there was this awkward moment of, but you told me. And then there was back and forth. It was a whole conversation. And so if we ever see that, that's very clear misadvisement, being told to do one thing and then that thing is not actually part of the plan. That lands very clearly in that and is probably going to be approved, but it may not be. There's also situations where emergencies are well and truly beyond the control of the student. Some situation has occurred during the semester that is actually quite devastating to their ability to complete semesters or et cetera. That's something that will be taken into consideration as well. Those are really the only two most common ones, however. Some medical situations may fall under the second one, but other times medical situations may be considered just for a withdrawal instead. I can't say for sure what they will or will not take. And so this big red text is here for a reason. It is possible that a student that you feel falls into one of these situations may still end in the end of the day be denied. It depends entirely on what is given to the registrar's office and their committee and what they review. No petition is guaranteed to be approved, and they will sometimes ask for more details. It's important that when you have a student who turn in one of these petitions, they continue to monitor their UMail, because the registrar's office may come back and be like, hey, your information didn't answer this question we have, or in reviewing your stuff, we have a new question that's come up. Can you answer this? And they may ask for more documents or more data or et cetera. And so it's very important they're watching that so that they can make sure they're getting that into them as soon as possible. In certain cases, if they apply for a drop, they may actually be approved for a withdrawal instead, and they'll move forward with that. There are cases where that is necessary, or just a more accurate representation of their record. That is usually the goal here, is to have the most accurate representation of their record. And so that may be the choice they make instead. There are some options to get tuition refunded for withdrawn courses, but that needs to be directed to income accounting. And as always, for the best information, you should probably go to the registrar's office. Again, I have a lot of good information. I work with them regularly still, and I've shared everything that I feel comfortable sharing, but there may be new changes and things to that all the time, and it's great to work with them. I will always keep in contact with them, especially as things interact with tuition benefit, but if you ever have a question about their processes specifically, please make sure you're contacting the registrar's office and getting that from them if you have any direct questions regarding that. Now, brief summary. Drops and withdrawals are not the same, as we said before. They may seem similar on an outside face in certain regards, but they will have wildly different impacts in some cases on tuition benefit. And so it's very important to know where each kind of falls. Additionally, in both the cases of drops and withdrawals, a student may lose tuition benefit, so very important to keep in mind. It is always best that students are working with you and their advisors as much as possible when it comes to their schedule, especially if they're on TB, because any small change may make it so that they lose a lot all of a sudden. And depending on when that change happens, they might not be able to fix it. And then finally, retroactive drops and withdrawals do exist, but they do have particularly difficult requirements for approval. So really, they shouldn't be the number one plan. They shouldn't be, oh, we'll fix that later. There may not be that opportunity. You want to speak to the registrar's office as soon as you know something's an issue so that they can give you the best advisement on that moving forward. Now, we will have some time for Q&A and stuff like that, but I want to make sure I give Jen their time to go over their G-Ship stuff. So we're going to go ahead and jump into that next. Jen, whenever you're ready for the next slide, you just let me know.
Okay, I'm ready. I am not camera ready today. I've been traveling, so that is why you just see my little avatar. My Mickey Mouse is my favorite guy. Okay, go ahead. Next slide. I just wanted to go over, since we have some new people in their roles, and we did have a last minute change in the United and EMI's billing. I just wanted to revisit some of the topics we talked about over the summer, as they are kind of now a little more pertinent as we are in the semester. In order to reconcile your enrollment, we're probably already past this, and hopefully y'all have already paid your fall invoices, or if you enroll your students on an annual basis. The only way that you can reconcile your enrollment with United Healthcare is to ask for an invoice from United Healthcare, and then you review that data, and then you make any necessary changes via the spreadsheet. And this will be the same process that you'll follow for the spring. For EMI, I have the dates for spring. So if you want to make sure you jot those down for those of you that do enrollment, EMI should be sending me a census for spring at the end of February. I will then send that out to you like I have in the past. And then you have until March 15th to make any changes. And I'm still in 2022, so please disregard the year. It should be 2023. Fall 2022 enrollment will roll over. So if you have a student who is that you're paying for the fall, there's no action on your part for EMI, because that enrollment will roll over for the spring. And then EMI will terminate all students as of 8/15/2023. Next slide. In regards to the billing, United Healthcare will email you invoices, and that you can also request them at any time during the semester. For EMI, for those of you that pay for insurance for your students, this year, EMI decided to just process in the fall an annual invoice. This is because last year they had departments pay the annual invoice, the fall invoice, and a spring invoice. So they thought that by processing an annual invoice, that should reduce the overpayments on our behalf. But what that does is, if you know that you're going to have any changes to your census in the spring, you're going to need to request a fall invoice. EMI sent out an email earlier, about middle of November. I'm going to find that email that would have been sent out and then forward it to everybody so that you all can see the changes, and it also gives you the contact name of the person at EMI. As we've always stated, if you know you're going to have any changes to your enrollment, it's going to be easier for you just to pay that fall invoice. And then in the spring, EMI will be processing spring invoices. And so that will capture students that are graduating on 12/31. You want to terminate their coverage. And then rather than pay the annual invoice and then ask for the refund, it's just a lot easier if you know you have changes to request that fall invoice. In the spring, they're still producing spring invoices, and those should be available at the end of March with a payment due the beginning of May. Now, our invoices were made available, I believe, the week of Thanksgiving. Even though we've got written down here to pay the invoice by December 1st, as long as you pay the invoice by the end of this calendar year, we should be okay. Next slide. When it comes to the dependent coverage, I just want to reiterate that the graduate school does not pay for dependent coverage. Dependent coverage dependents can be enrolled by the department for United Healthcare. We need to make sure if the student is on GSHIP, that the student is on GSHIP first, and then you can do the dependent enrollment. We have been rolling enrollment for our GSHIP students for the last 3 semesters. So we've got a process down really well. I'm going to be working with Logan on enrollment for the spring, where we should be enrolling our GSHIP students once a week, starting next week. So if you have students that are going on GSHIP and your department covers the dependents, reach out to us, and we'll let you know if we've already enrolled that student for coverage. For the EMI process, it's still a little bit, it's different in the sense that you need to complete an EMI dependent coverage form. It's important for the department to send these forms in, because at the top of the form, you need to indicate who's going to be responsible for the premiums. This year, we made the forms available on our website under coordinator resources. There should be a section about insurance, and that's where you can find those dependent enrollment forms. Make sure if the student is paying for that coverage, make sure you send those forms to Taylor Bell with PHI as the first 3 letters in the subject header, because you are sending the student's checking account or credit card information. And then I finally have the correct EMI invoice. For those of you that do pay for dependent coverage and your students are on GSHIP, when it comes to EMI, the premiums follow the student. So I will be reaching out to you for a chart field so that I can charge the dependent coverage when I pay the EMI invoice. Next slide. When it comes to paying the invoices, please do not send your invoices to me for processing. I do not process departments specific EMI or United Healthcare invoices. You can process them yourselves. Check with your accounting department if you've got to use it as a purchase order, or if you can just go into the EPR system and process it as a student and educational student and education payment. This slide is similar to the one that we had in the summer series. So we provide the vendor numbers for you to use. And you also want to make sure that the account number in your chart field is 65810, which is specifically set up for student insurance. Next slide. As always, when you are making payments on behalf of a student, those costs should be recorded in scholarship admin as they go towards their cost of attendance. So once you have processed the student's insurance, you need to go into scholarship admin and record it as a miscellaneous item type. And that's it. Thank you for your time. If you have any questions, feel free to always reach out to me. And Matthew put in the chat that we're going to have an open forum. So I am done. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And so, yeah, we are going to kind of move into the Q&A forum section. If you feel confident and want to answer or ask your question in front of everybody, we can go ahead and go for that. Hands would probably be best, just so we're not all talking at once. Or if you would prefer something a bit more private, you can either send a message in the chat directly to Matthew or just in the chat in general, and we'll answer as best we can. We're happy to answer whatever you may have.
Logan, may I ask a question about incomplete classes?
Absolutely. What's your question?
So does TBP cover a course if the student decides to take an incomplete and complete it later?
So an incomplete grade is not noted as far as TB is concerned. So it's not something that would be noticed. And so that should be fine. The big concern there is, of course, with incomplete grades or T grades, it's important to know whether that is going to eventually transition into a failing grade with that I. And while that won't be a huge concern for us TB right now, it may bring down their GPA to a point where they're no longer eligible if they don't have a lot of other courses on record. And so that's more the major concern we would likely run into.
Okay, and if they have to repeat a course,
Repeat courses for the purposes of improving a grade aren't covered by
okay,
tuition benefit, if that's what your question is. I'm sorry,
Yeah.
I was so ready to go. I jumped
that's
right
fine.
over
It's fine.
it. And so if that's the question, then yeah, that's not covered by TV and they would have to pay for the improvement grade repeat.
At their current residency rate as
Correct.
well. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have a question in the chat box about entering for spring. And firstly, I've got to say thank you everyone for hitting the ground running. We've been open for, we opened yesterday, but we had some mechanical issues. So it's really been since this morning. We have about 150 students entered in already. These students are going in and signing. This is great. Gold stars for everyone. Katie had a question about a warning that she received on her page saying that there's not enough allocation remaining. So this might be happening to a few of you. So here's what this means. We have your estimated use for fall, which is if you have 10 students in, it's 10 times the cost of 12 resident credits of tuition and mandatory fees. Even if the students are enrolled in 9 credits, the estimation is the same. If the students are at 50% benefit, the estimation is still that full amount, just so that there's a safety bubble there and we don't go over. And so that will be corrected to actuals once we get to finaling the fall semester on about the 14th of January. So as you're entering students, you're going to have S added to that estimated used, going against your estimated remaining, one student times 5380, I believe, for each student. So you might run out, even though your students are going to be at 9 credits or a reduced amount, what have you. So if you have gotten to this place, and I've had a few inquiries already, and you are stuck, reach out to me and I will help you troubleshoot individually. Most likely what happens is I temporarily increase your allocation so that you can go in and very quickly that day finish entering your students, and then I return your allocation back to what it should be. This is something that we are working with UIT on, but is one of many, many priorities. So we appreciate everyone's patience as we go through these allocation growing pains. So moral of the story, email me if this is happening to you. And thank you, Katie. I'll look out for your email.
Corey, I see your hand.
Hi, I'd like to verify something about a retroactive drop.
Sure.
So assuming that retroactive drop is approved, on your slide, it said it would be as though, the item was never on the transcript, but it'd be the same rule. So if that retroactive drop were approved and that put that student's enrollment at fewer than 9 credits, that still would affect tuition benefit, right?
That's correct. If it has,
Okay.
especially if it was happening during the semester. So if it was
Right.
one of those weird ones like half semester classes or et cetera, if it's retroactively dropped during the same semester, the TB portal is still actively checking for that information during that time. And so it will see the class gets dropped, especially since the way that the registrar's office does the drop, it is as if it were dropped within the deadline. And so won't show on their transcript, won't be charged the tuition. And so it will run into the same problem of that might put them below the minimum requirement. And so they may then have to work on adding other credits right away in another function.
And then again, if it's in the, like, say, the next semester, it would be the same, not the same thing. It could be a far more serious.
It could be problematic. Our
Consequences,
advice
yeah.
in that case would be to send us that information because it is going to pay dependent on the student's individual situation if that could be a huge problem. And so we would need to really review that on a case by case basis, especially depending on time frame. If it's several semesters later, that may be something that we can't do much about. But something like if it's the next day after the semester ended, yeah, that's probably going to be a problem.
Thank you.
Of course. Now, of course, if you don't feel comfortable asking your question right away, you can stay on the line. I will stay on for as long as there are people in the call. So you can continue to ask things as you like. But if you feel confident that you're good with the information you've received today, the only last thing I'd have to say is thank you for listening to me ramble for some period of time. I love rambling. It's one of my favorite things to do. So if you ever have any questions, please shoot me an email and I will ramble to you further.